All right, it is 10:05 here in Eastern Time, so we're going to get started. This is the first meeting of the Just Transition Employment and Retraining Working Group, and my name is Cindy Osordo. I'm a policy analyst with the Climate Change Program at the Maryland Department of the Environment, and I'm really excited to be with you all here today to talk about this working group and our role this upcoming year. So the agenda for today will be to do some introductions. Everyone who is a member will be invited to introduce themselves, and then we will go over the Climate Change Commission as a whole, just brief history as well as the working group charge. Then we will have an overview of the Maryland Climate Pollution Reduction Plan, which just came out in December of last year. It is the statewide plan that is driving a lot of our greenhouse gas emissions reductions efforts. Then we will have just a very brief legislative update. And finally, we will have an open discussion on the work plan and the process for this year. And we'll be inviting your comments and your ideas during that portion of the call. At the end of every part of the agenda, we will be inviting questions. But for now, we are opening up the introductions portion. So if you are everyone is invited to turn on their cameras, but especially if you are a member, please feel free to turn on your camera and introduce yourself. Casey, could we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Casey Ross. I work for Lorax Partnerships. We're a building sustainability consulting firm, and I have a focus in terms of building energy systems and reducing energy footprints.
Hello, my name is Zachary Carey. I'm the Director of Science at the Maryland State Department of Education and cover science and environmental literacy education.
Morning, folks. I'm Allison Brightnether. I work at the Maryland Department of Transportation's Office of Climate Change, Resilience, and Adaptation, and also some of the workforce stuff that we have. And I'm also a rep on the Adaptation Resiliency Working Group for the Commission.
Good morning. I'm Sean Stracer, business agent with Steamfitters Local 602 in the Washington metro area. And we have several thousand members that work in building efficiency through upgrading HVAC systems, making them more efficient and helping to meet the standards that are coming.
Hey, good morning. My name is Ryan. I'm a business development specialist with Civic Works, which is a nonprofit in Baltimore that strengthens Baltimore communities through education, skills development, and community service. And I work across our Center for Sustainable Careers, which is job training and workforce development for Baltimore residents and those from historically marginalized communities, with some training tracks in the green energy space. And I also work on our energy programs team, which is energy efficiency and weatherization programs for residents of Baltimore and the surrounding areas.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brad Phillips. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, representing Maryland's 16 community colleges. And like Ryan, we're heavily involved in workforce training, job preparation, skill development, especially in regards to the future workforce needs. So thanks. Happy to be here.
Hey, everyone. Jason Asher. I'm the Political Director with the Mid-Atlantic Pipe Trades. I work with all the United Association of Plumbers and Steamfitters locals across Maryland.
Hi, I'm Michelle Joseph. I'm actually the president of Next Generation Inc. We are a pipeline where we recruit, train, as well as place women and BIPOC for clean energy jobs. And we're working with workforce development. We're based in Rockville, Maryland.
Good morning, I'm Jen Walsh. I am an Associate Vice President at Frostburg State University in Regional Development, and I lead TGCC, an organization that is business-led, also leading regional economic development. Thank you.
I'll go next. I'm Jared Tiemanson with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We're a U.S. Department of Energy lab. Do a lot of work focused on decarbonization strategies, modeling and analysis, and also workforce modeling and analysis to support those strategies. So glad to be here.
I'm Suzanne McCoskey. I'm an associate professor of economics at Frostburg State University, and I've just been appointed as part of the team that is doing community development and outreach.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Terrell. I'm the Director of Community Impact at Baltimore Gas and Electric. I lead our workforce development initiatives, which are all community facing, working with several community partners, community colleges, local colleges, and workforce providers.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chanel Viator. I'm a Special Grants Program Manager at the Maryland Department of Labor within our Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning. I manage a workforce grant for the offshore wind industry.
So I think we covered everyone. There are a few folks that were not able to make it today. And thank you everyone for putting in your name and organization in the chat as well. We'll continue in our agenda. So the Just Transition Working Group is under the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. The Climate Change Commission has been around for a while. The main goal of the Climate Change Commission is to develop recommendations to the General Assembly and the Governor on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the impacts of climate change. It originated in 2007, developed the 2008 Maryland Climate Action Plan, our first statewide climate action plan, and this led to the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Act, the GGRA of 2009. The commission was then codified into law in 2015. That same year, in December, it made recommendations that led to an even more ambitious Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act of 2016. Which we had as an agency, the Maryland Department of the Environment, been working under for a few years. That then became an even more ambitious law when in 2022, the Climate Solutions Now Act replaced the GGRA and ultimately expanded the Climate Change Commission membership as well as the state goals. And that's what led to the creation of this working group that we are now meeting under. So originally, the Climate Change Commission had 4 working groups: the Adaptation and Response Resiliency Working Group, the Scientific and Technical Working Group, the Education, Communications, and Outreach Working Group, and the Greenhouse Gas Mitigation Working Group. And the membership has expanded due to the Climate Solutions Now Act to include this working group, the Just Transition Working Group, as well as 3 others: the Energy Industry Revitalization Working Group, the Energy Resilience and Efficiency Working Group, and the Solar Photovoltaic Systems Recovery, Reuse, and Recycling Working Group. All of these working groups will be kicking off their meetings for the first time this year. So this working group is the Just Transition Employment and Retraining Working Group, will be called JTWG for short, and it is focused on equitable workforce development and training. This includes energy efficiency measures, transportation measures, natural working lands, renewable energy, and other clean energy technologies, and ultimately is aimed at supporting equitable economic development opportunities at community levels. And we do have some dates already on the calendar. If you haven't received the calendar invitations for future meetings, you will be getting that shortly. Thank you to everyone, all the members that responded to the survey that influenced the dates that were picked. All of these dates will be held on a Friday, 10 to 12 in the future. So each working group is a little bit different, and the membership is determined by how it's set up in the law. And in this case, this is the largest working group of any of the MCCC working groups. It has 33 members. It includes members from the General Assembly, from the Senate, House of Delegates, as well as state agencies, and a wide variety of other organizations also selected their members, union representatives, and other environmental organizations and other organizations. You can see the list on our website, and you can also check it out here. But for now, I just wanted to give the broad overview that this is a very well and diversely represented working group. So now we are going to, before I move on, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions on the working group or the Climate Change Commission. I'm not hearing any questions quite yet, so we can move on. And everything will be on our website, as my colleague Chris Beck posted, in case you wanted to check out these slides after the call. The next part of the agenda is on the climate pollution reduction plan. This is the plan that is driving our greenhouse gas emissions reductions across the states. So we had already touched on the Climate Solutions Now Act. The Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022 required the Maryland Department of the Environment to create this plan. This plan built upon the previous laws and our previous GGRA plan and was released in December 2023. The goals by law are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the state by 60% by 2031 compared to 2006 levels, and to set our entire economy on a path to achieve net zero emissions by 2045. And ultimately, the law also requires us to do an analysis of the economic impacts and to create economic benefits in the states. If you want to check out the plan, it is on our website. It is over 100 pages long, so there are some details there that you can take a look at. So the plan includes both what is already in place, our current policies, as well as some planned policies. And this was the work of not just our agency, the Department of the Environment, but a lot of collaboration between different state agencies and local agencies and different sectors. This is the most ambitious statewide goal in the country. The great news is that the pathways do exist to achieve our very ambitious greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. Note that the 2031 goal is a gross goal, and the 2045 goal is set by statute as a net goal. So that means that it can include carbon sequestration, and that's the red part that you see on the right side here. The majority of the emissions will come from two sectors, the electricity and transportation sectors, that's shown in yellow and purple here. But really, this is a economy-wide effort, and we will require that all of our sectors participate in our climate strategies. So Maryland has already come very far. The air quality in Maryland used to be some of the worst in the country, and in the eastern part of the US, there used to be 8 coal-fired power plants in 2006. Now we are down to 2 coal-fired power plants. It's worth remembering that air pollution has a huge impact on our public health. Cleaner air means healthier lungs for our children, for the elderly, and our most vulnerable individuals. Climate pollution, such as air quality pollution, can create increases in heart and lung disease, adverse pregnancy outcomes, heart-related illnesses, infectious diseases, foodborne illnesses, and climate change can also disrupt critical care facilities, such as due to power outages and severe weather. So it is extremely important for us to continue to make progress on our climate pollution goals. Maryland is a leader in climate change. We have already gone from having some of the dirtiest air in the country to some of the cleanest. And this is not come out of the blue. This was the work of environmental groups, communities, the General Assembly, and Marylanders as a whole coming together to make progress. In 2022, we met all of our air quality standards since the Clean Air Act was first established over 50 years ago, and our climate goals can continue building off of our past successes. Some of the greatest improvements actually come from one of the largest sources of emissions, which is the electricity sector. And right now, I'm going to be shifting towards some of the 3 major sectors. We'll start with electricity, and then we'll talk about transportation and buildings. So here we can see that gas, coal, and imported energy. And we can see that since 2006, there has been a lot of reductions already, largely due to the closing of coal power plants. And we are continuing to project, we project that there will be a lot of emissions reductions due to the expansion of renewable and clean energy in the states. One of the major pieces of the plan comes from our governor saying that we will be able to reach 100% clean energy by 2035, and that will get us the rest of the way in terms of reducing emissions in this particular sector, the electricity sector. Within this sector, across the country, what we are seeing is that there have been a lot of efforts from governments and businesses to invest in large-scale actions, but we also are projecting that we need individual actions to get us fully there. That means investing in small-scale actions, such as encouraging individuals to buy electric vehicles and electric heat pumps when an old system breaks down. So this ultimately does mean electrification is part of our future. That includes heat pumps, which have been able to come a large way, technologically speaking, in terms of efficiency and in terms of providing comfort than they did before. And they are now already outselling a lot of gas furnaces. We also are seeing a lot of electric vehicles get sold and compete with traditional vehicles. In 2023 alone, electric vehicles like the Tesla Model Y, Tesla Model 3, and the Chevy Bolt, just a few examples, were some of the best-selling cars in the country. And we are going to be seeing, as our grid becomes cleaner, that our appliances, our vehicles, will be increasingly powered by clean electricity as well. One of the concerns that some people have regarding our electrification efforts relates to safety and reliability. And the Climate Solutions Now Act did think about this issue by requiring the Public Service Commission, our statewide utility commission, to study this particular issue. And what the Public Service Commission study found, which was also released in December 2023, I believe, at the end of 2023, is that efficient electrification of buildings and vehicles will require investments, but it will still be able to be done in a reliable and affordable way, even when compared to historic levels. So now we'll move on to the second sector, which is transportation. This is the largest emitting sector in our state. Ultimately, what our plan includes is the decarbonizing of the sector across public and private vehicles. This means moving away from fossil fuel burning internal combustion engines towards zero emission vehicles. The plan does include specific policies, one of which is the Advanced Clean Cars 2 policy, which requires that 100% of new cars, light-duty trucks, and sport utility vehicles sold in Maryland must be zero-emitting vehicles by 2035. And Advanced Clean Trucks policy also requires certain types of medium and heavy-duty trucks sold in Maryland to be zero-emitting vehicles in certain years. In addition to these requirements for vehicles themselves, the plan is also encouraging the reduction of vehicle miles traveled, VMT. This includes expanding access and affordability of public transit options, such as creating more walkable pathways and creating more bikeable local spaces. One of the largest concerns regarding the electrification of vehicles is having access to charging stations. This is often called range anxiety, which is when an individual might experience fear or stress, either perceived or real, from not having, from being on the road and having the fear of being stranded without access to a charging station. The good news is that in Maryland, we are building a reliable electric vehicle charging network, and we already have over 1,500 public charging stations. And we are working with state and federal funding to expand our charging network even further. This means that the Maryland Energy Administration, the Maryland Department of the Environment, the Maryland Department of Transportation are working together to invest in charging infrastructure and building up the network. As one example of another effort that is very recent and very real is the Maryland Clean Energy Center has also won a $15 million grant to continue to build out these public chargers. The third major sector that we will touch on from the climate plan is the buildings sector. The Climate Solutions Now Act includes one of the most ambitious policies regarding buildings in the country, and it's called Building Energy Performance Standards, or BEPS for short. BEPS is a regulation aimed at decarbonizing large buildings that are over 35,000 square feet over time. So these certain buildings will have to reduce their emissions by 20% by 2035 and reach net zero by 2040. There are approximately 9,000 covered buildings in Maryland across various counties. The plan also includes other building-focused policies. Notably, there is the Clean Heat Standard and the Zero Emission Heating Equipment Standard. And I'm not going to touch too deeply into these, but the goal would be for both of these to encourage or require appliances to be cleaner, as well as to decarbonize certain covered sectors and to work with some of our existing laws and programs in tandem so that we can decarbonize the building sector and reach our climate goals. So what does this mean for our economy? What does this mean for our workforce? The great news is that the plan did model the economic impacts, and it found that there will be a positive impact from the electrification, from all of our changes that we will have to do to meet our climate goals. The plan estimated about 27,000 jobs will be created. This could mean electricians, this could mean HVAC technicians, and ultimately what this working group will be able to do is contribute to the creation of these new jobs and ensure that these jobs will be able to reach underrepresented individuals, and that communities that have historically been left behind will be able to take advantage of this clean energy transition. The benefits will also reach the individual consumer. The average Maryland household would be projected to save about $2,600 annually by using an electric heat pump and an electric vehicle instead of gas appliances and gas cars. This will increase over time as we clean our grid, and the savings are even higher if it's a household that uses oil or propane that would switch to a heat pump and electric vehicle. This ultimately means putting money back into Marylanders' pocket to be able to benefit our economy as a whole. And what the state is trying to do is help these families or individuals be able to afford the upgrades. And so we will be seeing incentives be available from the Maryland Energy Administration, for example, in the coming months, in the coming years. The federal government has already provided a wide range of incentives. This includes home energy audits, zero emission appliances, solar panel incentives, home insulation incentives, and zero emission vehicle incentives. This is coming from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the IRA Infrastructure Reduction Act. And if you want to learn more, I would encourage you to check out the White House website on that. But ultimately, there are a wide variety of federal incentives already available to help with this transition. This is just expanding on some of the incentives. You can see that $8,000 could be made available for HVAC, for heat pump, for electric panel upgrades, for electric wiring. So it's not just the appliance itself. There's also incentives to help make those appliances work for those that would want to switch over from gas to electric. And once again, it's worth remembering that this is going to benefit and be available for low, moderate, and middle income households. And the plan does propose that through state collaboration, we would continue providing those incentives in the years to come once those federal funds run out. So you might ask, where's this money going to come from? The plan does provide a few ideas. This could include federal grants and loans. This could include green revenue bonds, a cap and invest program, a carbon fee, hazardous substance fee, fees on fuel burning vehicles. A wide variety of different fees could be explored by our General Assembly and our governor. The plan does call for about $1 billion per year will be needed to reach our goals. So this means that we will need creativity, we will need engagement, we will need various sectors working together to be able to find the funding that we need. And ultimately, also keep in mind and prioritize our governor's call to leave no Marylander behind. Excuse me. So next up, we will talk on some investments that we would prioritize with $1 billion annually. We talked about some of our largest emitting sectors. We talked about some of our policies, and the high-level overview is that we would need building electrification. We would need to transition to electric vehicles. That includes our charging infrastructure. We would need to decarbonize the most emitting industrial sectors, and we also need workforce development. And just as a reminder, these are the slides that our agency uses for presentations on the climate plan. These are the official slides, and workforce development is a priority for our agency. In addition to the real environmental benefits, the real climate pollution reduction benefits that our plan proposes, there would be a lot of economic benefits. The costs, the $1 billion price tag is large, and that could easily take up a lot of attention, but it's also worth remembering that public health benefits will be there, a cleaner environment would be there, and ultimately a healthier economy is also being proposed by our plan. This means 27,000 jobs. This means $2.5 billion in increase in personal income. And this means that our gross GDP, or Maryland's GDP would grow by $5.3 billion between now and 2031. This is not a zero-sum game. This is an opportunity to create a healthier environment alongside our economy. So environmental progress is real and tangible to our citizens. This means that benefits can be absorbed, can be observed by communities that have been historically left behind due to things like bad air quality. And I'm sorry for my cats. She's meowing. But this means less asthma cases. This means reduced cancer rates, increased life expectancy, and ultimately more Marylanders being able to go out and enjoy our forests, our beautiful waterways, and more money in Marylanders' pockets to not spend on health bills if they get sick from cancer or from any other pollution-induced illness, and instead be able to enjoy our beautiful natural resources. We are doing this for ourselves, for existing Marylanders, but also for our future generations. And we have, as I mentioned earlier, seen a lot of progress, and we can still achieve even more by continuing to make climate progress through our policies. Sometimes when we talk about our climate plan, we get the reaction that Maryland is just one state. What can one state do? But it's worth remembering that emissions reductions are not just local in nature. We are also contributing to global emissions reductions, and Maryland has the chance and is already a global leader and can set an example for other states and could even set an example for the country and the world. In terms of some next steps, the Maryland Department of the Environment will continue to work across our partners, our state agencies, our local agencies. This includes by maximizing federal funding opportunities. MDE does have a climate pollution reduction grant website that you could check out. This will provide the opportunity to leverage hundreds of millions of dollars for our climate efforts. We are also going to be launching a variety of different regulatory processes. We already touched on a few of the policies that you can expect to see in the coming years. And then we will continue to engage with this commission, the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, including through this brand new working group, the Just Transition Working Group. And lastly, we will continue to evaluate funding mechanisms, including the creation of new funding mechanisms. At this point, I will pause and we can open it up for any questions or comments.
Hi, Cindy. This is Michelle. I just wanted to say that this is excellent. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to collaborate with companies as well as entities within the state of Maryland to add value. My only question was, within this time frame, what would be the priority that you would envision in a short period of time that we would be focused on as a working group? That was my first question.
We will be having that discussion during the work plan portion of the agenda. The main priority will be developing recommendations for the consideration of the Climate Change Commission, and that will be ultimately shaped by the members of the working group. And again, the membership was shared earlier in the presentation if you wanted to check that out. But we will be shaping the priorities as we continue our discussions.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. Really appreciate all of this. As a Maryland Climate Commissioner myself, I wanted to point out just a couple things. First is that many of the charts are to some extent aspirational because they were created based on the idea that our current policies are implemented perfectly and on time. And obviously there are been and continue to be many barriers to success. So to the extent that we decarbonize, it's going to take longer, and we can't take anything for granted as the uptick in EV adoption, solar and wind is taking more time than we had hoped, number one. Number two, we are seeing that many providers of services, particularly for large systems, whether you look at wind or otherwise, are deeply concerned that if Trump wins election, that IRA and other funding will end. And so it is causing a lot of anxiety for starting new big infrastructure processes until the election is over. Because people don't want to build a bridge to nowhere where they start a big infrastructure project and then it gets canceled. So I just wanted to, bake in those challenges along with the fact that the extremely well done plan requires $1 billion a year to implement. And this year we got a nice down payment with $90 million, but that was less than 10% of the need. So obviously the core number one priority needs to indeed be the funding, not just maximizing federal funding as you have above, but creating an actual funding plan from inside Maryland, whether that's cap and invest or the renew plan or a combination of things. This has to be extremely high priority. And I also wanted to mention that when we think about climate justice, we often, and Justice 40, which is people who are disproportionately impacted by climate change, we often think of race and place, but I wanted to also add that people with disabilities, of which we have 660,000 here in Maryland, are significantly disproportionately impacted by climate change. But I represent climate philanthropy on the Climate Commission, and I just funded over 20 climate organizations, including almost all the big ones in Maryland, and none of them are completely accessible to people with disabilities. And that is a real problem, that they don't even have access to helping on the issues. And one of the things that I'm concerned about, for example, is that when you go to the legislature for a hearing, they don't even have the captions turned on in the hearing rooms, so that people who are deaf or hard of hearing don't even have access unless they do a preliminary request for it before the hearing. So we do have some baked in barriers to 660,000 people here in Maryland. And I wanted to ask if you have any sense of how the recruitment is going for the very key positions that are in Maryland state government, because I have seen that there are a plethora of incredibly key jobs that are available at our departments of energy, transportation, environment, natural resources. And these are incredibly important roles that need to be filled for us to be able to advance our agenda. Thank you for listening.
Jennifer, you touched on a lot of very important topics. This working group will not be able to cover everything that you mentioned, or is not in charge of creating the solutions for every piece of the very important issues that you mentioned. But one of the things that this group will be able to do is narrow down on the pieces that we do think we can focus on and just try to tackle that. So stay tuned for that piece. But we do need to stay engaged on making sure that the current policies get implemented. that the planned policies get implemented. It is very real. These are models. The reality is that we will have a lot of work to do, including in our plan, including in engagement communities. And as for your specific question regarding critical openings, I don't have any information on that, but it is, in my view, very encouraging to see Governor Moore supporting the creation of these new positions, because we did have a lot of agencies that needed to build their capacity to meet not just our climate goals, but to function. So thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I will put it up to the group. We could do a break now, or we could do a break after the legislative session portion of the meeting.
Can we keep going?
Yeah, we can keep going. Thank you, Delegate Boyce, for joining us. So next up, we will do the legislative session highlights, and then we'll take just a 5-minute break. The legislative session just ended, and we are just going to cover a few bills. If you attended the Maryland Climate Change Commission meeting this past Tuesday, you would have seen an overview of the various bills that were either passed or did not pass this legislative session. If you did not get a chance to attend that meeting, you can also check out the presentation as well as the recording on our website. Please also note that the Climate Change Commission website does include the 2023 annual report if you wanted to take a look at the annual recommendations from last year. Those recommendations influence a lot of the bills that we'll be covering today. So first, I did want to just briefly note that the Climate Change Commission membership itself will be changing this year due to 2 different bills that passed. One is SB 777, State Treasurer and Comptroller Membership Responsibilities. The other is HB 323, SB 337, Environment Commission on Climate Change Membership Addition. Ultimately, we will have the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, the Public Service Commission, and the Comptroller added to the membership of the Climate Change Commission membership itself, and the Treasurer will no longer serve on the Climate Change Commission. And if you would like to see the full list, you can always just check out the website. It is up to date. Next, we will cover an adaptation-related recommendation. As you might recall, there is an adaptation and resiliency working group, and one of the recommendations from last year involved the integration of resiliency measures into local level comprehensive plans. And one bill that passed this session is SB 148, Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program Funding for Underserved and Overburdened Communities. And ultimately, this would require 40% of funding provided under the Comprehensive Flood Management Program to directly benefit underserved or overburdened communities and provide some funding in the case of extreme risk of flooding. This is an example of a funding solution that supports our adaptation and resiliency goals that are outlined in the next generation adaptation plan. The draft plan is available and the final plan will be made available later this year. Next, we'll cover a mitigation working group recommendation. Last year, there was actually for a few years now, there was a recommendation on the Empower program, the Empower Energy Efficiency program. The recommendation said that Empower should work better to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The climate plan also mentioned this critical program and mentioned that electric and gas utility companies should require and facilitate beneficial electrification in order to encourage the transitioning of our appliances. And HB 864 does just that. The main goal of Empower is moving away from an energy savings goal towards a greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal, including through, for the first time ever under the program, defining beneficial electrification. This means that our major utility companies will be, and the Department of Housing and Community Development will be able to support our energy efficiency measures, will be able to develop the workforce and training that is needed to support these electrification measures. Next, I wanted to just highlight one piece that is very relevant to our plan, which is the budget bill, SB 360. There was a recommendation, an overarching recommendation in the report last year that said that state funding should align with our climate goals, such as through zero emission technologies, should not support or incentivize fossil fuel projects, systems, or infrastructure, and should support our overburdened and underserved communities, and including to be aligned with the Justice 40 initiative. And one very real example of the leadership of our General Assembly and our governor is that through the budget bill, $90 million will be set aside from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, SEIF, to go towards uplifting communities that have been historically been left behind. Notably, there are three main initiatives. There will be $17 million provided to electric school buses to support our public schools. $23 million of grants will be made available for electric vehicle charging infrastructure in low and moderate income communities, and $50 million will be made available to electrify hospitals, schools, multifamily housing, and other community buildings. Lastly, I wanted to touch on a bill that was not a Climate Change Commission recommendation, but it was an example of leadership and collaboration from a wide range of different stakeholders due to its innovative and creative approach. This is the HB 397, the WRNF bill, Thermal Energy Network Systems Authorization and Establishment, Working for Accessible Renewable Maryland Thermal Heat, or WRNF Act. The bill proposes the implementation of a pilot program that would establish networked geothermal projects across the state. The bill would offer funding for community organizers or neighborhoods, including those in underserved communities, to engage with their gas-serving utility company for the creation of a pilot program. The gas-serving utility company would then be able to apply for approval from the Public Service Commission, the PSC, to explore geothermal potential, and all of these costs would ultimately be able to be recovered through a rate case. Notably, this bill has a lot of best practices, a lot of labor provisions that would impact our workers. That means our operations workers, our construction workers, our maintenance workers. The labor provisions include prevailing wage requirements, project construction, being subject to an agreement that establishes terms and conditions, a requirement that at least 80% of contractors take a 10-hour occupational safety and health administration course, and promotion of career training opportunities in manufacturing, in maintenance and construction industries for our local residents, for our veterans, for women, minorities, and formerly incarcerated individuals. We are actually on time. This is the last bill that I wanted to cover. And we can open it up for any questions on this portion or any other portion now. And then we can take a break. Jennifer?
Yes, I mentioned in the Climate Commission meeting that I heard from many legislators that they were concerned that there were so many bills this time in the legislature that it did not give enough time to the elected officials to consider the most important ones. And that, so I wanted to suggest that the environmental community, the pro-climate, solutions community, focus on a smaller number of bills and making sure we build coalition before the session starts. So around funding, for example, we have got to get the climate work funded, and the fact that Better Buildings didn't pass, which means that buildings, brand new construction, will get done the wrong way and more money will be put into legacy fossil fuel appliances, etc. Those seem to be two very high priorities. It was also a problem because it undermined the ability of the legislative staff to do really thoughtful fiscal notes. And fiscal notes need to be very credible. And if they don't have enough staff because there's too many bills, it undermines the success of all bills. So we have Delegate Boyce, who probably knows this 1,000 times better than me, but I am concerned that we didn't coalesce around our core priorities fully as a climate community to get past the funding and Better Buildings, and perhaps renew or other funding mechanisms to make the polluters pay for the damage that they caused.
Yeah, there were a lot of bills that did not pass, and there were some bills relating to finding funding sources that did not pass, like the Renew Act. Are there any questions on the bills that we touched on in this presentation, or any comments? And Jennifer, thank you for that. It is very real that there are constraints. There's only so many bills. There's only so much work that can be done in a session. I've heard similar concerns in previous sessions as well. If there are no comments or questions, we will take just a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and talk about the work plan. This will be a discussion on the work plan. We'll be right back. I hope everyone is back from a short break. So this is the last portion of the agenda, and this is the portion where I would encourage folks to turn their cameras back on, especially if you're a member of the Just Transition Working Group, because we will be having a discussion. So before I share the work plan and just go over the outline of the work plan, I wanted to keep some high-level timelines in your mind, all of which might be subject to change just depending on how we move along in our process and how the Climate Change Commission decides to do their voting process this year. So we will be developing recommendations for the consideration of the Climate Change Commission. The draft recommendations will begin around August. We'll continue discussions in October. We will have final recommendations ready to go in October to provide to the Climate Change Commission. The Maryland Climate Change Commission will ultimately vote on the recommendations across all of the working groups around October or November. And this year, as I mentioned, is a little bit different because we have so many new working groups. So the steering committee of the Climate Change Commission is changing. Things are just changing because of these new working groups. And then finally, as in every year, there will be a final report that will be submitted to the General Assembly and the governor in December. Does anyone have any questions on this, this brief highlights of the timeline? Okay, we will start with the work plan. So everyone has a copy of this. It is also on our website. And after this meeting, I'll be finalizing it. This will be kind of our North Star, but it will be subject to change. This just provides the background, rough timeline, some of the topics that we'll be exploring throughout the year. So I'll just give a brief overview and then we can open it up for discussion. So first, the work plan includes the background and purpose as required by the law, the Climate Solutions Now Act. As you can see, it includes advising the Commission on issues and opportunities related to workforce development and training. This could include energy efficiency measures, renewable energy, other clean energy technologies, with a focus on targeting the availability of these opportunities for underrepresented individuals, including veterans, women, formerly incarcerated individuals, and dislocated workers affected by the downsizing of fossil fuel industries. There will be the identification of energy-intensive industries and related trades. This will be an analysis portion, and MDE will be having technical assistance available to do this work. We will be advising the Commission on the potential impacts of carbon leakage risks, and we will conduct a study of a number of jobs created to counter climate change impacts across various sectors. So the brief overview of what is there in the law is recommendations to the Climate Change Commission and some research priorities. If you took a look at the work plan, prior to this meeting, there are several guiding questions. I'm not going to go over them. Many of you are experts in your field. You have been in this industry for many years. And one of the things that this working group is trying to do is listen to what your needs are and understand so that we can develop recommendations that are actionable for our Climate Change Commission to consider, and our Governor and General Assembly to also consider. The timeline is that this group will be meeting on a monthly basis virtually. There could be the opportunity to do in-person meetings, but for now, the plan is to do virtually every month, and meetings will be roughly 2 hours. If you know anyone that wants to get added to the email list, or if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And then these are just draft agendas. Today's the first meeting. All of the meeting dates are already included here. You'll be getting calendar invitations shortly if you haven't already. We do have a few new members that have been trickling in. And so the next meeting will be touching on just transition approaches, as well as energy sector on existing efforts. So this could include energy efficiency, transmission, distribution, battery storage, and grid modernization. And then we would be touching on the continuation of the energy sector through wind energy or solar energy or geothermal, and move into fossil fuel communities, transportation and research, natural working lands, and then the just a brief overview of the clean economy. We could include different approaches there. By then, we would be finalizing our recommendations, so that would be taking up a lot of the meeting. And then finally, we would just have a final check-in. Where did we land after the Climate Change Commission voted on all of the recommendations across the different working groups? We would make sure we would report out on where things landed this year. So we can open it up for any discussion on any portion of this agenda, but I was thinking it would be most helpful to perhaps, if you have comments, ideas, if you want to volunteer on being a particular guest speaker, or have ideas where we could focus, that we would encourage you to do so now. Allison?
Yeah, so two quick things. One, just a quick confirmation that I see you have NDOT listed as a potential speaker in August, and we're happy to confirm that we can make that meeting and that we can have someone presenting, and the specifics of what is discussed can be done later. And the second piece, and I see a little bit of it in meeting 6, and this question is with the recognition that this working group cannot do everything for everyone, right? And transition of workforce is a really big piece. But I just want to make sure that, kind of as I'm understanding it, that the focus is predominantly on emission reducing workforces, because I'm thinking specifically around like engineering retraining to better understand resiliency measures, whether that be, elevating structures, or the training of folks who put in living shorelines, or kind of anything like that. The adaptation resiliency piece seems to be a very small portion of this. And that is not to say that that is incorrect or wrong, but I just want to make sure I'm really clear on kind of the scope of the industries that are going to be covered by the Just Transition and Retraining Work Group. I come from an adaptation resilience focused background, so that's typically the lens that I see things through. So it seems disproportionate to me. But again, we can't do everything for everyone, right? We can't get for every single industry. So I just kind of wanted to flag that. I am glad to see it. And I know it's part of the natural and working lands piece. But, even kind of the questions in the energy intensive industries, just wanted to be really clear on if kind of industries that support the CPRP are the primary focus of this group.
So the law does call for the inclusion of natural working lands, and that's specifically why I included it here. So the study would include the working land sector. So because we are working under the climate plan, which is focused on climate pollution reduction efforts and emissions reduction efforts, yeah, we would likely be more focused on the industries and the workforce that would be more relevant there rather than just general resilience. But I'd be happy to take any comments there as well.
No, that's totally fine. I think it was just a clarification of scope. So it's kind of that the CPRP is the guiding document in which the recommendations of this group and the focus of this group will be in support of, instead of a broader climate, the broader climate that is all encompassing. And that's fine. I just wanted to ask, just for clarification, kind of make sure make sure I'm in the right lane.
Yeah, so there is the potential that we could collaborate with the adaptation working group, for example, on this call. Perhaps they could come in and talk about some of their next gen priorities. We had mentioned that that plan is going to be coming out, but because our agency, my agency, the Department of the Environment, is more focused on the climate plan, that will likely be where we gravitate towards. But happy to, also take other comments as well. Jennifer?
So I don't know what is already being done and what would be new. So for example, I put in the chat 2 articles. Recently in Washington, there was a fabulous fair where the public could come and learn about opportunities for them to do electrification. But in the morning of that event, they had training for contractors on things like heat pumps. So is creating sort of regional fairs that included workforce are part of what we could recommend, or is this already in place in policy? Secondly, I also put in a clip because in Philadelphia, they've created a place for people to come and learn about, for example, different kinds of heat pumps and how to install them. I don't know how many such facilities do or do not exist here in Maryland and where the gaps might be. Is there any way for us to get clarity on what people working in government already think is missing that needs to be created that we should be supporting and putting into this year's climate recommendations?
So we do have union representatives. We do have energy efficiency representatives. It is very much of interest to support our contractors. I'm adding that to the list of ideas here. Thank you. Regina? Delicate voice.
Sorry. How we're working with the Department of Labor, considering they have a plethora of apprenticeship programs already in place, and how those apprentice programs, especially around construction and electrification, need to be potentially changed to add some of the kind of like these new processes and procedures. I've heard some arguments from certain unions as it relates to electrification, and that sometimes we post this as, oh, we'll just train these folks to do this particular thing, and it's a little bit more complicated than kind of training somebody to do a specific thing like maybe solar panels, or trying to change out an electric box as it relates to solar panels. It still falls under kind of like an electrification or an electrician's certification, and how we're just fitting some of these nuances in current trainings as they are. So I'd be interested in knowing how we're working with the Department of Labor with apprenticeship programs, because some of this stuff already does exist. It just needs to be increased.
We do have 2 state agency representatives in this working group, one of which is the Department of Labor. Chanel, would you be able to talk a little bit more about your program, and then Delegate Voice's idea?
Yeah, so I mean, specifically the program that I manage for Maryland Works for Wind, we work with 6 of the unions to develop and adjust their programs for the offshore wind industry for those specifics. So for example, I work with IBW Local 24, and we work on adjusting their curriculum for cable splicing that fits the wind industry. Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what Delegate Boyce is saying in terms of making sure that we're aligning these apprenticeship programs to fit the needs that are evolving within all of the clean energy industries that are coming up.
Yeah, so the Department of Labor does have an apprenticeship focused program, and that could be something that we could, reach out to their program and just kind of talk to them a little bit more as we go along. Thank you. I think, and I'm adding all of the ideas. Any idea right now is fair game, so please do feel free to ask your questions and ideas. Khalid?
Yes, Khalid Malik with GEMCOM. I'm curious to know about the BEPS program and how that's going to play in to this working group, because benchmarking is one of the fundamental elements of achieving BEPS, and so I believe there's some opportunity there to introduce perhaps K through 12 community college students into the world of benchmarking, and which would open up a lot of interesting career paths. Okay. Considering scoping of projects, and how to size an opportunity, but benchmarking can certainly be the basis of a number of programs through workforce development, starting with, possibly middle school, high school students, but just want to get that on the record.
Khalid, could you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, certainly. Khalid Malik, GEMCOM, Grid and Energy Master Planning for Communities. We're a nonprofit organization. We've been operating throughout the Mid-Atlantic. Well, actually, we focus in on the DC, Maryland area. My experience goes back 15 years working on energy efficiency projects as far south as Georgia. And of course, Maryland is a very progressive state. And so I'm very familiar with a number of programs that are happening in Montgomery County. And so there's a lot of experience there that we can, glean from to develop these state initiatives. And so, just happy to be here and share my thoughts and ideas on how to make things happen.
Thank you so much, Khalid. Last week, I had the opportunity to attend the Montgomery County Energy Summit, and one of the presentations was actually by our BEPS, our Building Energy Performance Standards coordinator, alongside Emily, who heads the BPS of benchmarking and the building performance standards at the Montgomery County level. And one of the highlights of that presentation relating to how to achieve compliance is that all buildings across the board, whether you're going to comply or not have to comply with BEPS, any building should start doing that benchmarking. And for everyone here, what benchmarking means is the tracking of data, just the collection of data. So getting more building owners, more consumers across the board to have that knowledge of what the building is using in terms of energy can go a long way. Thank you so much, Khalid.
Yeah, and even further to that, I heard you mention there's 9,000 plus structures that are going to have to comply starting next in 2025. So maybe even consider square footages lower than that and introducing, because you get over 35,000, it gets a little complicated in terms of data input. But maybe start a program for facilities under 35,000 where we could introduce, the students into and get them familiar with the process and really just, bring them into the world of building science. And then from there, they can, select the path, whether it's, skilled labor, unskilled labor, but it's certainly a good way to introduce them to a number of opportunities that are going to be here the next few decades.
I'm not sure if Peyton or Sean were next. Peyton?
Sure. So thank you, Khalid, for talking about the K to 12 arena. So at MSDE, a question that was relayed to me from our career and technical education staff was related to what industry recognized certifications are associated with these jobs. And that could provide a seamless path for high school students into employment. So that was something that we thought would be helpful. Yeah, and specifically with industry recognized certifications.
Hi, good morning. My name's Sean Straser. I'm with Steam Fitters Local 602, as I said earlier, and we represent the heating and HVAC industry in Montgomery, Prince George's counties, all of Southern Maryland. And we've had a recognized or registered apprenticeship program with the state of Maryland for going on 50 years. And a significant portion of what we do is HVAC work, new installations, maintenance, service. And with the transition that we're discussing here, a lot of the replacement of this new higher efficiency equipment. And these new technologies that are coming, these aren't simple pieces of equipment. They're very complex. Some of the multi-zone heat pumps require quite a bit of training. And, this isn't something you just say, hey, come over here for the weekend. I'll show you how to put it in. And then we go put this equipment in, because there's, amounts of refrigerant that need to be put in at the right amounts. They need to be started up, tested, balanced, a variety of things. And that's what we do. And we have a 5-year apprenticeship program, and a significant portion of that 5 years is dedicated to training people how to put these systems in, maintain them, service. And we have about 5,700 active members working right now, and more than half of them are in the HVAC side of the industry. And, we want to contribute to this transition. We have opportunities. Our newest apprenticeship class that's starting this year, we just brought in 320 new apprentices. Our program's over 1,000 individuals. With some coordination here, we could double the apprenticeship we have in order to meet these goals. The contractors are there. We have over 250 different contractors. We have 1,000 apprentices, and the rest are all journey workers, men and women from a variety of different communities that are making a positive impact on this transition.
I don't know about anyone else here, but that is music to my ears. Yes, that's exactly what this working group is trying to support. Thank you, Sean.
Hey, Ryan with Civic Works here. I'll second what Sean said about the contractor education piece, around electrification being really essential, trying to figure out how to do that effectively. We'll also mention like figuring out how we can position our existing networks of energy auditors in the state to be able to conduct electrification audits, and what can sort of exist for that part of the process to, you know, as sort of a pathway for the energy auditor to provide some electrification evaluation on the front end that then goes to the contractor potentially. And the last thing I'll say, which has already kind of been mentioned, is thinking about like the pre-apprenticeship sort of piece of this, especially in terms of equity. What can we, apprenticeships are so important, but how do we also create the introductory pathway to give people kind of the baseline certifications and education that allows them to get through the door with some of the organizations that are working in this sphere and are a big part of this transition. That's definitely something Civic Works thinks about with our model. Also happy to present on behalf of Civic Works at the next meeting, like it says on the outline here, or whenever he feels appropriate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ryan. There's a lot of synergy here. Michelle? Michelle, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Ryan and Sean, you're speaking my language. One of the things that we're talking about with us, especially, is apprenticeships. And we were able to work with Newark Works last summer and work with the pipeline to kind of vet potential folks who are interested in going into electrification, doing energy audits, as well as being interested in HVAC. And we worked with them over a period of, I'd say about 8 to 10 weeks, and then recommended them into a 30 to 40 week pre-apprentice program that led to a job with First Energy. We'd love to do the same here and see how we could actually get that pipeline moving. And it makes sense that we work in concert with Ryan and Sean. Much of what you're doing is tied to apprenticeships, and we find that that's very successful.
Michelle, for the group, could you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about your organization?
Absolutely. My name is Michelle Joseph. I actually am a resident in Montgomery County, but had lived in New York and New Jersey and had started a nonprofit there. It allowed us to expose ourselves to different schools and school districts, and we found that there was a lack of a pipeline necessarily for those who are interested in not necessarily going to college, but definitely trade schools. So started Next Generation Inc. I'm the president of that organization. We work with clean energy companies and energy companies, and we create a pipeline through training, placement, recruitment, as well as professional training for individuals who would be placed in the clean energy as well as the energy arena. We've been doing that roughly for a couple of years, but just through our partnerships, been able to place quite a few people, men, women, as well as BIPOC in those fields. So there's definitely an equity lens, which we look at as well. Available if anyone has any questions, and I'll put my information in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So there's a lot of interest in the energy efficiency portion of the agenda, which I had, just one meeting about. But I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit more about wind energy, solar energy. We did touch on a geothermal bill, and just generally also looking for comments across other industries as well. Jennifer?
Yes, I just wanted to lift up that some of the great science that the entire world counts on is being done in Maryland through some of the federal agencies that are located here. And I don't know what we can do as a state to ensure that those agencies are maintained, but I did put in the chat that Donald Trump has already indicated that he wants to eliminate or dramatically reduce some of these key agencies, which do employ thousands of people here in Maryland. And, the world is counting on that excellent science.
We do have higher education and community colleges represented in this working group. I'm not sure if those representatives were able to attend today, but one of the things that this working group could leverage is the expansion and potentially protection of some of our efforts. But I cannot speak for them, and I'm not sure if that's a priority for this group, but thank you for that. That comment. We did have a few comments in the chat that that we had not discussed. Jason Asher mentioned carbon capture, as well as nuclear and small modular reactors. Jason, would you like to speak more about that?
I was just curious where it was in the climate change plan. I haven't had a chance to read through the whole thing yet.
So the plan does assume that nuclear continues. There's nothing specifically about small modular reactors, and then carbon sequestration is expected in the future. But yeah, those are the big highlights. Would you like to speak more about how this working group could take a look at that or any other aspect here in the work plan?
I don't have any more thoughts on it at the moment. It was a question that popped in my head as I was seeing everything coming up on the screen in your agenda.
Okay, thank you. So let's see, did I miss anything else in the chat? So Suzanne did mention, not sure where this would fit in, but there could be some conversation about the influence impact of global energy markets on the development of recommendations. Suzanne, would you like to speak a little bit more about your comment?
Yes, I think that there just has to be some recognition that fossil fuel prices are really high now because of global developments, and that influences a lot of these cost estimates and a lot of these transition estimates for low-income households. But that may not be something, that may not be something that is maintained. If there is, hopefully peace in Russia, Ukraine, or if the Middle East doesn't get worse, I think there just has to be some recognition that a lot of these estimates on demand and supply factors are going to be based on kind of relative price of different energy options. And I just was looking a little bit at California and kind of this discussion of potentially over electricization when we don't have the grid for it yet. So I guess I'm relatively new to this area and what a lot of the discussion points are, but I just wanted to highlight that point, that some of the estimates and some of the job demands and so forth, may be at a high right now because of what we're seeing otherwise in global energy markets.
That does remind me of the Public Service Commission report that did come out just a few months ago. It did touch on there being ample supply for many of our needs, but that is something that we could try to explore a little bit more as we go along. But thank you. I will mention that one of the focuses of this working group is how to support local communities, how to support training or workforce or economic development at the local level, partly because some of our federal funding requirements require exactly just that, community organizers doing a lot of the work. Let's see, we didn't get any comments on fossil fuel communities in Maryland. Would anyone have any comments on that piece? And we will, I'll have to close the conversation in just a few minutes so that we can have time for any final public comments and just finish off the meeting.
I don't have anything on fossil fuels, but I can touch on the wind energy real quick. So with offshore wind in the state, Governor Moore set a goal of 8.5 gigawatts by 2031. And so the Public Service Commission is tasked to develop a plan of how to reach that goal to the General Assembly by January 1st of 2025. Right now, with the anticipated growth within this industry, our biggest challenge is timelines. With offshore wind, things have been delayed over and over again, which makes it a little hard to properly build the workforce and have, the amount of individuals needed for the industry. With labor and also MEA, we both have workforce grants for the industry, and particularly focusing on the sectors of the skilled trades, manufacturing, and transportation and logistics. And so with such an ever-changing timeline, our goals are to just build those sectors up in the state of Maryland so that when the projects do come online, we do have a skilled workforce already existing in the state instead of having workers come from outside of the state.
Thank you so much, Chanel. Yeah, so Maryland Energy Administration does have a wind program. They have an excellent website where you can check it out if you wanted to learn more. It actually is modeled after a Department of Labor program already existing, that has been existing for years at a smaller scale, but that is part of the conversation here, is how can we support the workforce that will be needed for our clean energy future, and that includes very much our offshore wind goals.
Cindy, when you say you want about fossil fuel communities, do you mean like wanting BG&E or somebody to come speak or discuss them, maybe what they're doing or not doing? I'm just a little.
Yeah,
you.
so as part of setting this working group up, I did take a look at how other states have approached just transition strategies. So one of the things that I was thinking we could do is we could invite a state agency from a place like Illinois or Colorado who has had a just transition office already in place, or just transition focus or workforce focus. For example, Illinois has a excellent
I understand. Okay.
yeah.
I just misread thank you so much.
Yeah, but I mean, if BGE volunteered to talk about some of their strategies, that could also be explored. Thank you.
I'll just second really quick what Jennifer said about like a energy fair, an energy education fair of some kind, and just sort of more generally emphasize, in addition to the contractor education piece of it, the consumer education piece of it, around electrification, and making sure people are aware of what these technologies are and are excited about them and interested in them. I know it's maybe not exactly within the scope of what we're talking about in terms of workforce development, but for the jobs to exist, making sure that the market's there is also important. And just on both sides, the education piece I just think is huge. People don't necessarily know about all this stuff yet.
I will mention very quickly that MDE ran a process last year called the Building Energy Transition Implementation Task Force that made recommendations to the General Assembly and Governor in January of this year. And as part of that process, there was a nonprofit called Rewiring America, as well as other nonprofits that would be that we could call on to give a presentation on some of their tools, some of their resources to do exactly that. Thank you, Ryan. Jennifer?
I agree that Rewire is a tremendous asset, and bringing them in would be extremely helpful. There are some union folks on here, and I'm very interested in whether you do any sort of surveys or inventories of your existing members, how many feel competent and comfortable with things like solar, EVs, and heat pumps and all those sorts of things. Are there surveys so we know what percentage of the existing workforce in those sectors is already familiar and comfortable with these kinds of installations? Because what I'm hearing is that when people's heat pumps die, that the contractor comes and pushes fossil fuels in many cases because they're not familiar with the heat pump and don't really feel as comfortable with installing it as something they've been doing for decades. I mean, should the state do an inventory or a study to see where we are with the existing people who are already in this workforce?
Yeah, so that is something we're going to be diving into later. So again, we are going to have technical assistants to do a study on the number of jobs that will be created to counter climate change, and that could explore some of what you're talking about, Jennifer. Doing an assessment, and then more to come on that piece in the coming meetings. But for now, we are just kind of collecting ideas, and I do have to close it for comments unless any union member wanted to react to Jennifer.
Well, I just would like to speak directly, Jennifer, that, you know, our contractors are already installing these types of equipment now. Heat pumps, and they're, you know, we've been educating people on this for years. So the workforce is there, and, you know, we can start expanding the workforce to meet these goals at any time. We just need the jobs.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you, Sean. So we did kind of already have, you know, public comment already integrated throughout the entire meeting, but I did kind of just wanted to make one last call. If you're not a member, please feel free to raise your hand and make any final comments. I did just want to highlight that our next meeting will be May 31st. And just be looking out for the meeting invitation on that. And if you have any questions or comments following this meeting after our discussion on the work plan, please feel free to reach out. We will, I will be finalizing this and trying to integrate your ideas. But if you come up with any other ideas in the coming weeks, please do let me know. Does anyone have any final questions or comments from the public?
Thank you so much for bringing us together, Cindy.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Awesome. Well, if there are no other comments, then we will be closing it off and we'll be seeing you again in a month. Thank you so much.